So today we're going to talk about Stoicism. So Stoicism is a big topic. It belongs to the period of antiquity, around the 3rd century before Christ. It is a philosophical movement that comes after Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. It's a movement that lasted through the centuries and underwent many developments, even distortions. It's always difficult to approach a major philosophical school like this one, because the question is where to begin. The difficulty is even greater because Stoicism corresponds to what we could call a total philosophy. A total philosophy means that it is not only a system of thought, a way of understanding the world. It is both a theoretical philosophy and a practical philosophy. It is a philosophy oriented toward understanding, but also toward action, action in the world, and therefore directed toward the individual. So I'm going to start from a few quotations. I'll quote them from memory because I didn't prepare this video. I prefer to improvise, give some directions, and then everyone can take what they want and continue their own research. I'll start with a first quotation that is often used to summarize Stoicism. There are things that depend on us and things that do not depend on us. The Stoic vision of the world is based from the start on a fundamental distinction, a distinction we must become aware of in order to understand our limits as human beings and as individuals. There are things that depend on us. For example, it depends on me to work in order to succeed. It depends on me to seek the truth. It depends on me to act well. It does not depend on me to be tall, strong, or powerful. It does not depend on me to be beautiful. It does not depend on me to be born in one place rather than another. So we can quite clearly understand what the Stoics are telling us. There is what we inherit, and there is what we build by ourselves. Of course, one could always reply that this boundary is rather blurry. For example, the Stoics say that it does not depend on us to be rich, but one could object that, in a sense, it does depend on us. If I direct my actions toward material and financial success, I have a better chance of becoming rich than if I do nothing. So yes, one can always find details where this division between what depends on us and what does not is debatable. But broadly speaking, we understand what it means. For the Stoics, becoming aware of this distinction is only a first step. It is the first step toward realizing that we are not capable of everything and that we are fundamentally limited. From this point of view, Stoic philosophy is a call to humility. Humility being nothing other than the recognition of our powerlessness and our finitude. Put differently, if I have wishes, desires, or ambitions that are completely disproportionate, sooner or later I will be confronted with my limits. I won't be able to obtain everything I want, and when I encounter obstacles to my desires, I risk becoming unhappy. Put simply, if I desire impossible things, I will suffer. That may sound obvious and banal. One might say, is this really philosophy, saying that what is impossible is impossible? In a sense, yes, it's a tautology. But if the Stoics take the trouble to emphasize it, it's because in our daily behavior, in real life, we tend to forget it. We tend to believe that certain things depend on us when in fact they do not.
They give some very concrete examples. First example, I know that my life is limited, that my existence on this earth is finite in time, and the existence of all human beings is finite. So when someone dies, even if it's someone I loved deeply, I must accept their disappearance. I must accept their death, because it is in the essence of the human being to be born, to live, and to die. For the Stoics, being sad because a loved one dies is first of all a logical absurdity. And it is true, it is a logical absurdity. I cannot make the people I love eternal. That is a fact. So this first limit of human nature, death, the temporal limit, I must not only know that it exists, I must accept it. And this is where we see that for the Stoics, understanding something, being aware of something, is not merely knowing that it exists, it is accepting it in the deepest part of one's being, even in the flesh. This is when we realize that Stoic philosophy is not only theoretical, but truly practical. It is both a philosophy and a psychology. Our life is not eternal. We must accept death. We must accept our own death. Epicurus said that learning to live is learning to die, and philosophy is all the work of accepting death. But this is not accepting it as something sad or regrettable. It is accepting it as a necessity, as a law of nature. And it is only when I deeply accept it as a law of nature that I can free myself from the sadness, grief, and suffering that this idea normally carries. If you try for a moment to imagine at what age, in what place, and under what circumstances you will die, whether of natural causes, in your sleep, in a car accident, or from an incurable illness, what will immediately invade you is a feeling of anxiety. For the Stoics, that anxiety is proof that in some way you have not accepted the idea of death. We find this idea both among the Stoics and the Epicureans. Death is nothing. Death is nothing, because while we live, death is not there, and when we die, we are no longer there to suffer. In the end, we never encounter death. Death takes us away in an instant. We don't even have time to see it. So the fear of death is a fear of an idea, not of a reality. It is the fear of a mental projection. This brings us closer to the core of Stoic philosophy, the role of imaginative projection, which means that the individual is never fully present in reality. We are never truly in the present moment, so to speak. We are always anticipating the future or feeling nostalgia for the past, but in the end, we are never really in the present. The problem with these projections is that they generate emotions. Emotions the Stoics called passions. Passion in Greek is pathos, which means suffering. Passion is what we are passive toward, what we undergo. Fear, regret, jealousy, envy, anger, all of these are emotions, passions, but they are first and foremost creations of our mind, and they prove that we do not accept existence as it is. I used the example of fear of death, but we could take many others. For instance, if I am jealous of my neighbor because he has a nicer car, a more attractive partner, better children, whatever, this jealousy is a projection of my mind. If my neighbor did not have what I lack, I would not be unhappy. So it's because my neighbor has what I don't have that I feel this frustration, which manifests as jealousy. But in that case, it's not my neighbor who is responsible, it's me. I let this thought and the emotions that follow it take over me, my emotional state, so I am responsible. It depends on me. And here we arrive at a key Stoic idea. I must not be affected by what does not depend on me. First observation, there is what depends on me and what does not. Second observation, I must not be affected by what does not depend on me. I said earlier that fear of death is a logical absurdity for the Stoics, but in fact for them, all emotions are logical absurdities for a simple reason. An emotion does not solve the problem that caused it. In reality, for the Stoics, the cause of our emotions is ourselves. But we spontaneously identify the cause of our emotions as something external. If I am angry, I say it's not my fault, someone made me angry. For the Stoics, that's nonsense. If we are angry, it's because we cannot control our emotions. The other person is merely a pretext to justify our anger, to justify our inability to master ourselves.
We are responsible for our emotions. Proof of this is that some people manage their emotions very well. Some people are not disturbed or affected by external events, even events that seem extremely serious or painful. That's why we say these people are Stoic. In everyday language, Stoic means impassive, without passions. It's a form of indifference, but not an indifference due to lack of awareness. On the contrary, it is a controlled, assumed indifference based on the awareness that some things do not depend on us. The Stoics say, why be affected by what does not depend on you? It won't solve the problem. Anger won't eliminate the causes of anger. Jealousy won't eliminate the causes of jealousy. For the Stoics, emotions are like heat produced by energy we fail to channel. We externalize that energy through emotion, but it doesn't solve anything. If I bang my knee against the corner of a table, insulting the table or hitting it won't make the pain disappear, though it may allow me to release some energy. If I watch a TV show featuring BHL and insult him and throw the remote at the TV, it won't solve anything either. What the Stoics are telling us is that there is no point in being emotional. Through emotions, we mask our inability to accept the world as it is. That's why another Stoic saying is, don't try to change reality. Change the way you look at reality. Of course, one might say, what kind of philosophy is this? Isn't it a philosophy of submission, of passivity? That's a legitimate concern. If I accept everything, isn't that renunciation? Doesn't it mean accepting injustice, lies, theft, betrayal? Yes and no. Remember that the Stoics distinguish between what depends on us and what does not. There are things we can control. The Stoics say, give me the strength to change what can be changed. The first difficulty is knowing what can be changed and acting at my level on that. But I must not have ambitions beyond my means. I must not believe I can revolutionize the world alone. I must accept that the changes I can make will be proportional to my capacities, relatively small compared to the world. But I still have a choice. I can do what I can, or I can give up and say it's pointless. If I give up, the Stoics say, I am not doing what depends on me. I am renouncing out of ego, because I can't bear the idea of not having more control over the world. That reasoning is driven by ego, emotion, and a desire for omnipotence, and for the Stoics, that too is an aberration. So the Stoics say, act within the perimeter where you can act, and don't worry about the rest. The rest does not belong to you. It belongs to the world. We are part of the world. We leave our mark on it, but we do not own it. Rather than a philosophy of renunciation, I would call Stoicism a philosophy of lucidity. People who accomplish great things are those who don't worry about what they cannot do. They focus exclusively on what they can do. Having unattainable dreams is the best way to achieve none of them. Desiring the impossible leads to inaction, passivity, and frustration. Stoicism is a practical philosophy because it pushes us to align our actions with our thoughts. If I act out of anger, jealousy, or resentment, my actions will bear the mark of those emotions. If I act with enthusiasm and a kind of unconditional joy, I am freer. I don't depend on my emotions or on unrealistic ambitions. For the Stoics, emotions enslave us. They prevent us from seeing reality as it is.
If I start from the idea that the world existed before me and will exist after me, that puts my capacity for action into perspective. It doesn't mean I am incapable of anything. It means I am aware of my limits. Emotions enslave us because we don't choose them, we undergo them. For the Stoics, the goal of human existence is happiness and wisdom. Wisdom is the condition of happiness. Wisdom is linked to knowledge and understanding.
I understand the world, I understand how it works, I accept it, and because I accept it, I can be happy. Sartre once said something that sums up the Stoic point of view well. Quote, "What matters is not what has been made of us, but what we make of what has been made of us." End quote. We all have a temperament that doesn't fully depend on us, but nothing prevents us from working on it, from understanding it, and from changing it. That does depend on us. The Stoic view of the world is deterministic. Everything that happens has causes. That doesn't mean God's pulling strings. It means nothing happens without causes. Explaining something does not justify it morally. But for the Stoics, if we could identify all the causes of events, we would see that everything is logical and rational. Coincidences, for example, only seem extraordinary because we ignore their causes. From an omniscient point of view, nothing is surprising. For the Stoics, nothing that happens is astonishing. Everything follows necessarily from causes. The universe is rational. If reality is rational, human beings should try, as much as possible, to conform to this rationality. The more we do so, the freer and happier we become. Happiness is independence from emotions and desires. Stoicism may seem inhuman or inaccessible, but the Stoics don't care. They ask, is it possible to move toward this ideal? Yes, it is, even if it's difficult. Happiness for the Stoics is not the satisfaction of desires. On the contrary, satisfying desires enslaves us. Desire shows dependence on something external. True happiness is no longer depending on desire. One can be happy in illness, in solitude, even in physical suffering. Epictetus, a Stoic who was once a slave, tells the story of someone twisting his arm until it broke. He simply said, "I told you it would break." This illustrates the Stoic ideal, pure observation without emotional disturbance. The Stoics also recommended practices like meditation, focusing on consciousness rather than the body. To conclude, there is what depends on us and what does not. It depends only on us not to be dependent on what does not depend on us. The universe obeys laws, laws of necessity or fate, but for the Stoics, fate is not negative. Free will exists in the sense that it depends on us not to be affected by the necessity of the world. It depends only on us to be happy in our situation. Stoicism is a practical philosophy, but it cannot be reduced to self-help techniques. Mastery of emotions can only result from a deep understanding of the world. Understanding does not automatically mean acceptance, but acceptance is impossible without understanding. Nothing is gained by resisting what is unavoidable. Getting angry because it rains or because it's cold won't change anything. But if I accept what initially seems unpleasant, it stops being unpleasant. Personally, I often use Stoicism when I read comments under my videos. I tell myself there's a reason for this, so I accept it. Stoicism is very practical, and reading fragments of it has a calming effect. I highly recommend reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, Meditations to Myself. As you read, you feel a strange sense of calm, as if the logical clarity of what you're reading aligns and balances you internally. And in that state, you realize that from a rational point of view, everything is justified, and that if life is not limited to reason alone, there's no reason for life to be a long succession of suffering. Thank you.